Today I'm going to be showing you how to make two different square and a square blocks. Aren't they both so cute? Before we get started on the tutorial though, thanks so much for stopping by my channel. My name is Fallon and my channel is So Be It Quilts. I absolutely love quilting and sewing. So on my channel, if you're new to it, you'll find a lot of different tutorials, quilt box unboxings, and reviews of different quilt supplies. So if you're interested in that, I would love for you to subscribe to this channel. And if you end up liking this video, I would love for you to give it a thumbs up as well and leave a comment. I love hearing from you. So these quilt blocks that I made, I actually used two different rulers or templates or trim tools, whatever you would like to call them. One is the square on square trim tool. This is a 6-inch trim tool. You can also make 3-inch square and square blocks. And this is from Creative Grids. You'll get a closer look at it in just a little bit. The other trim tool I used is the squared trim tool. This is actually able to make 1-inch to 6-inch squared blocks. And this is from Deb Tucker Studio. It's one of the Studio 180 design trim tools. So here is the booklet for that one. And here is the kind of booklet for the Creative Grids. And like I said, you'll get a much closer look at both of them. So let's dive in and see what these rulers are all about. Okay, so let's start with the squared block first. So that is the block that looks like this. And it is so simple to make. You'll be so surprised about how easy it comes together. So this is the Deb Tucker Studio 180 design squared ruler, and it looks like this. So here's the paper you get with it to bring you through all the steps, talk about everything about the ruler, and I'm telling you, it is really easy to use. One thing I love is that it shows you how you can fussy cut blocks using this ruler to make a very fun center block on the ruler. Now with this one, you'll be able to make 6 different sizes, starting with a 1-inch finish size squared, which I couldn't imagine how that one would look. It would be so tiny. I am curious though. And then all the way up to a 6-inch. So I'm going to do the 6-inch block today. So this one finishes at 6 inches. And what we did to start was we cut a 5-inch strip of fabric, and then I cut that down to the square for the center. And you use this block here to center that square. And that's why, because it's clear, it would be so easy to fussy cut a block. Okay, so I have all those squares cut, and you can see it just fits perfectly there, trimmed down, so easy to use. And then the nice size chart here. So it tells me for a 6-inch finished square, I need to cut 4 1/4 inch squares, and then I would cut those into triangles. So that was my square. And then I just cut it corner to corner to create the triangles. So prepping was insanely easy for this block. So then for each block, I'm going to need one of my squares and then 4 triangles. So when I go to sew, I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam along the side here with the triangle and the square right sides together. And I'm going to do that on both sides. Then after sewing, I will press it open and sew the other triangles on the other sides, one at a time. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine and first sew the first 2 triangles onto the sides of the square. All right, so now that we have our block pieced, we're going to use the trim down section of our ruler to get our block our squared block to the correct size. So since I'm making a 6-inch block, I'm going to line up the lines for the 6-inch square, and then just trim 2 sides of this. I mean, it is so easy. And then I'm just going to turn my block so that I have 2 sides that haven't been trimmed. Line up these lines that are here for the 6-inch block, and then just trim 2 sides again. Finished, just like that. It is so easy to use this squared ruler. And honestly, after you have it all figured out, everything is on the ruler. So there really wouldn't be any reason to keep track of the paperwork anymore after you kind of got it figured out, because you just, right on here, it tells you what to cut. So if I want 6-inch finished blocks, I just look over here, I cut 5-inch strips and use this section to trim it down. Same with the 5-inch. It's all on here. And then you have the size chart on the side for which size squares to cut, and then you even have the little diagram to remind you you're cutting it corner to corner to get those triangles. Then you just use this side to trim. It is so easy. I'm really glad that I have this ruler now to use to make these lovely square in a square blocks. All right, so here is the second square in a square block that we are going to work on, and it is a lot more complex than the first, but still really easy to sew once you have the trim tool figured out. So this is a square on a square 6-inch trim tool, and it is a Creative Grids ruler. I really like the Creative Grids ruler. Sometimes they can be a little more complicated than the Studio 180 rulers. However, they work really, really accurately. So just so you know, there are a couple different options for what you can do with this trim tool, and that is why I absolutely love it. You can do 3-inch blocks and 6-inch blocks, and you can do some fun designs on the center. It is so neat, all the options that you are given. You could do an hourglass block in the center. You could do a 4-patch. You can do a little pinwheel. There is a snail tail option. It is so fun, all the different things you can do with this block. So I did a simple 4-patch on the center, and then I just completed the block. Now, my 4-patch, I decided not to turn it into a snail tail, so it was a little bit easier for me with designing the rest of the block. This is a 6-inch finished block as well. So I'm going to show you all the different pieces that I needed for this. So first I have the squares to create the 4-patch center, and then you have these trim tool sections on this trim tool to get your 4 patches perfect. So you have one for the smaller 3-inch block, and then you have one for if you're completing the 6-inch block. Now I also have 2 different sets of triangles here, and where the cut information is on the block is right here. Now it did get a little confusing for me. I had to read the instructions on this block a few times because I was like, what, block A1, block A2, block B1, block B2. So essentially what I figured out is the A1 and A2 are cuts for if you're doing the smaller block, and the B cuts are if you're doing the larger block. So I use the B1 cuts. These are for this inner square that is around the focal point. And so I cut 3.5-inch squares and then cut them corner to corner for my triangles. And then for the larger outside triangles, you cut 4.5-inch squares and then cut them corner to corner to get your larger triangles here. So that is all the cuts we have. Now on the center cutting trim to size, this is where you would find all your cuts for whatever size center block you're wanting to make. So one thing that is different, I think, between this Creative Grids and the Square Squared from Deb Tucker is that on this block here, on this trim tool here, you don't have all the cuts that you need to complete all the different centers for your square that you're going to make. Now, so you would want to keep track of your paperwork here. I do like that everything is right on the other ruler. However, this one gives you so many instructions for a bunch of different designs, so I feel like that kind of makes up for it. So let me set some of this to the side, and then I'm going to show you the first step that you would have if you're going to make a square and a square block that looks just like mine, is you're going to make your center patchwork. So I would just be sewing these right sides together, sew along the edges, press them open. I pressed both to the darker fabric, and then you would sew them together again. So I'm going to put these here because I have one that I have already finished, because that is a really, really easy step, I think. So because I'm doing that larger block, I'm lining up this piece square trim area right on my 4 patch. I'm actually going to line it up this way so I can trim 2 sides at once. So I'm just lining up these. There's like a center dot here that I'm lining up right in the center of the 4 patch. And then I have these dotted lines that I'm lining up on the seam. And then I'm just going to trim this. All right, and then I'm going to turn it again so that I have the 2 raw edges, line it up, and trim. You do kind of get a lot of excess extra fabric on that one. They're sized a bit bigger than you really need, but I followed the measurements in the block or in the book. So just the same with the other one, we're going to put our first triangles on. So first we're going to be sewing just 2 on, right sides together, sew a 1/4 inch seam along each side and press them open. What I like about this 4 patch is you see I can line up the point of my triangle right on the seam, and then I know it's completely centered. We are going to be trimming, so it's not that big of a deal, but I did find that really helpful. So I'm going to sew 2 on opposite each other, press them, and then we'll sew the other 2 on. All right, so now that we have the first triangles sewn on and pressed, we are going to find the B1 square on our template. So that one is right here. You might be kind of hard to see, but there is a white solid line going around to form a square. That's what we're going to line up on our center block here, and then trim 2 sides. So I'm going to go ahead and trim these 2 sides here. And then I'm going to rotate the block so that I can trim the final 2 sides. So I'm lining up that same square, the B1 square, on the center block and trimming off the excess. All right, so now we have a nice finished square here, and we're going to add on these final triangles in the same method that we did before. So we're going to need 4. We're going to sew 2 on, right sides together, 1/4 inch seam along each side, press them open, and then we'll be adding on the top and bottom. Sew them on, press them open, and then we'll be ready to trim this block for the final time. All right, so I have every triangle sewn onto this final block. But before I show you the final trimming, I want to talk about getting points on these squares. So if you're struggling to get those points and you really, really, really want to make sure that your blocks are perfect, I know some of us are like, you know, so be it. But I want to show you my little trick for if I'm really wanting everything to line up nicely. So when I put my triangle on here, right sides together, sometimes I'll just sew with it up. But if you flip to the other side and sew with your square up, when you're sewing your 1/4 inch seam, you can see exactly where that point is. So if you sew across there and use your stiletto, make sure your needle goes just to the inside of that. You'll get your perfect point. All right, so let's trim our final block. And to do that, we're going to be using the square labeled block B2. And it is this dark line coming around here. And we're going to line that up on our new center block, so this blue one. And when we line it up, we're just going to trim 2 of these sides here. So I'm going to trim the right side and then across the top. And then I'm going to turn the block and trim the final 2 sides. All right, and there is our square on square creative grids. Look at how this quilt is coming together. I really love that these blocks can make other designs come together depending on your layout. Do you spy here this little block here? Kind of looks like an hourglass block. And I love that because these squares in my little 4 patch are so bold. When I put more of these blocks on here, I'm going to have this line that comes through if I make sure to orient all these blocks the same. You know, you don't want to have one accidentally turn the wrong way. All right, so I am so hoping that you put a comment down below and let me know which block you liked better. Did you like the square and a square, squared block from Deb Tucker's designs? Or did you like the creative grids block that I made? I definitely think the squared block is a very easy block to make. So if you are new to quilting, definitely grab this one. You will be so happy learning how to make this block with a much easier to follow tool. If you're a little more advanced, I think you would love the Creative Grids block. It is easy to use once you figure out all the measurements and how to follow the instructions, but it is a little more complicated. There's a lot more pieces that you need, a lot more pieces to cut, and a ton more options. Like I said, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let me know what you think, and are you excited to see this quilt come together? Make sure you keep following my channel. Go ahead and subscribe because I will post a picture of this quilt later on when I get it all finished. Thanks so much for watching, you guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye.